The spaceport of ZL-9 loomed as the largest and busiest hub in the known universe, a teeming crossroads of species from galaxies so distant they defied Earth's wildest imaginations. All around, creatures with shimmering scales, semi-transparent bodies, or clusters of eyes chatted in tones that ranged from melodic murmurs to ear-piercing metallic screeches. For someone born on Earth, it could be a surreal paradise or a waking nightmare. For Alex, a 14-year-old from a dusty Arizona town, it felt like both. Clutching his standard-issue backpack and a deck of contraband playing cards tucked carefully inside, Alex hesitated at the shuttle's exit ramp. The past 2 years of preparation, a long journey across space spent under relentless holographic lessons about ZL-9's culture, biology of alien species, and strict intergalactic etiquette, suddenly felt woefully inadequate. Nothing could have prepared him for the overwhelming strangeness of it all. Human, a raspy voice grated from his left. Turning, Alex found himself facing a short, green-skinned alien with pulsating cheek flaps that flared in and out like tiny sails. Its bulbous eyes narrowed in what could only be described as suspicion. "Not many of your kind here," it said, the words dripping with disdain. "Fragile species, you humans." With a dismissive sniff, it shuffled off without waiting for a response. Alex clenched his fists but forced himself to stay quiet. He'd been told humans weren't exactly respected in the wider galactic community. To the species here, humans were barely more than a curiosity, a primitive race that had only recently stumbled onto the intergalactic stage. "Blend in and don't draw attention," his advisor's voice repeated in his head. Alex gritted his teeth, the sting of the insult lingering. What did they know about humanity, anyway? As he wandered deeper into the station, he became acutely aware of the stares. Beings from countless worlds paused in their tracks to scrutinize him, some amused, others indifferent, but all undeniably curious. Alex kept his head high, echoing his father's parting words before he boarded the shuttle. "They'll look down on you, son, but you've got something they don't." His father hadn't explained what that something was, though, and Alex couldn't help but feel like he'd been sent to the front lines with no weapon. Navigating the endless maze of corridors, Alex eventually stumbled into his assigned homeroom, an enormous amphitheater with tiered seating arranged in concentric circles. Floating spheres hovered beside each seat, giving students the option to levitate rather than sit. At the center of the room stood a being that seemed to defy the laws of matter, its translucent form constantly shifting and glowing with soft hues of blue and violet. This was Instructor Vex. "Greetings, beings of the cosmos, and welcome to the Academy." The instructor's voice resonated, somehow transmitting directly into Alex's mind. The words unfolded in flawless English, though Alex could hear them simultaneously spoken in languages that felt like static, melody, or alien hums. "Today, we are joined by a new student, hailing from Earth." The introduction was neutral enough, but when Vex's shimmering form flickered slightly at the mention of Earth, Alex couldn't help but notice the unspoken disdain. A ripple of laughter came from the far side of the room, where 4 students in sleek gray uniforms adorned with species-specific insignias whispered among themselves. The leader, a tall, lizard-like alien with iridescent scales, leaned forward, his lip curling in a sneer. "Another ape for entertainment," he hissed, revealing sharp, needle-like teeth. Alex quickly learned the ringleader's name was Kylock. Flanking him were Zith, a shapeshifter whose body constantly rippled like molten silver, Crown, an insectoid with glossy black eyes that seemed to miss nothing, and Ren Li, a bird-like alien cloaked in shimmering blue feathers. Alex's fists clenched at Kylock's words, but he forced himself to stay quiet. He focused on Vex, whose amorphous body glided across the amphitheater, explaining the Academy's history and purpose. Yet, the taunts from Kylock and his group persisted, biting and relentless. "What's the matter, Earth boy?" Zith jeered, her form twisting grotesquely into a caricature of Alex, with exaggerated ears and an overly large nose. "Did your species skip the evolution class on intelligence?" The laughter that followed was cutting, and Alex's face burned. He tightened his grip on his deck of cards, the one thing from Earth he'd managed to smuggle with him. They were more than a simple distraction. They were his anchor, a reminder of home in a galaxy that seemed impossibly alien and hostile. The morning lesson was a practical exercise, designed to test cognitive sharpness, focus, and control qualities that most of Alex's peers seemed to possess in spades. Vex explained the task, levitating an object using only mental energy. Around him, the other students began with ease. Ren Li, the feathered alien, manipulated objects midair as if they were extensions of her own body. Crown's antennae pulsed with energy, controlling several objects at once. Zith showed off by transforming her hands into tendrils and creating intricate shapes in the air. Even Kylock performed the task with effortless confidence, his tail flicking smugly behind him. Alex, however, struggled. The object in front of him wobbled slightly, but no matter how much he concentrated, it refused to lift. Typical, Kylock scoffed, his voice dripping with condescension. He didn't bother to hide his amusement. Did you think this would be as simple as one of your primitive Earth games? Maybe you're better off sticking to kicking pebbles around. The group's laughter rang out again, and Alex felt his cheeks flush hotter. He bit his lip and stared at the object before him, willing it to rise. But it remained stubbornly in place, as if mocking him along with the rest. Alex's fists clenched, his fingers itching to reach for his deck of cards, but he held himself back. His father's words echoed in his mind. Asterisk, you don't have to prove anything to them. Just focus on making it through. Asterisk, surviving, however, was proving to be its own challenge, especially at lunch. Seated alone at the far edge of the bustling dining hall, Alex poked at a bowl of oddly colored stew that smelled like rust and tasted even worse. Around him, students from every corner of the galaxy gathered in animated groups, their languages weaving a chaotic symphony of sounds. They shared food, laughed, and swapped stories, their connections built long before Alex had arrived. He was an outsider, conspicuously alone, and it felt like every eye in the room had noticed. He tried to keep his head down, blending into the background, but his quiet was shattered by the familiar clatter of claws on metal. Kylock and his crew sauntered over, their presence drawing immediate attention. The lizard-like alien stopped in front of Alex's table, a smug grin spreading across his sharp-toothed face. Well, look at this, Kylock drawled, slamming a clawed hand onto the table. His hot, acrid breath washed over Alex as he leaned in. The Earthling all by himself, playing pretend like he fits in. Alex met Kylock's gaze, his brown eyes steady. What do you want? He asked, his tone calm but firm. Kylock's grin widened, his sharp teeth glinting. I want to prove something. You don't belong here, so let's make it official. The room went quiet, the alien students turning their attention to the confrontation. Alex felt his pulse quicken, a drop of sweat tracing the back of his neck. But he didn't look away. And how do you plan to prove that? He asked, his voice even. A contest, Kylock declared, his eyes gleaming with mischief. You and me right now. Show us if your primitive Earth tricks are worth anything at all. Alex hesitated, the weight of every gaze pressing down on him. He didn't want this attention, but backing down wasn't an option either. Slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his deck of cards. As he began to shuffle them with fluid, practiced movements, Kylock's confident smirk faltered ever so slightly. Oh, rectangles with pictures. I'm shaking, Kylock sneered, though his claws tapped the table with faint impatience. Is this how you entertained the other apes back home? Alex ignored the jab, his focus on the cards. These weren't just cards to him. They were tools, an extension of the hours he'd spent perfecting the one skill he felt he could control. While he couldn't lift objects with his mind or command alien technology, these cards had rules, and Alex had mastered them. With a flick of his wrist, he sent the cards into the air. Unlike his earlier struggles in class, this display was deliberate. The cards twirled and spun, forming elegant arcs and spirals that moved with precision. They danced in synchronized patterns, weaving into shapes that shimmered as they caught the light. A faint hum filled the air, and a soft purple glow began to radiate from the card's edges. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the display grew more intricate, the cards swirling faster, creating complex illusions of cascading waves and geometric patterns. Kylock's smirk wavered as he watched, his tail flicking with irritation. Cheap theatrics, he muttered, though his eyes remained locked on the spectacle, betraying a flicker of unease. The murmurs around the room grew louder as Alex's display continued, the air electric with curiosity. For the first time since his arrival, Alex felt the shift. He wasn't just the outsider anymore. He was something to be noticed. Then why can't you stop watching? Alex countered, a faint smirk tugging at the corners of his lips. With a flick of his wrist, the cards shifted and spun, forming a flawless circle in midair. That's when Alex felt it, an energy thrumming through him, through the cards, a connection deeper than skill or practice. It was as if the cards understood his intent, magnifying it and turning thought into action. The room seemed to hold its breath. Whispers of admiration, confusion, and even awe rippled through the crowd. For the first time since stepping foot on ZL9, Alex didn't feel small or out of place. He met Kylock's glare head-on, his smirk widening. Why don't you give it a shot? Let's see what you can do with a simple deck of cards. Kylock's reptilian lips curled back, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. He hissed softly, his tail lashing behind him. It's nothing but a cheap parlor trick, he spat, though the uncertainty in his eyes betrayed him. Maybe, Alex said, lowering the cards and smoothly stacking them back into his hand. But at least I know how to put on a show. Soft laughter rippled through the crowd. Some students, who had been silently observing, now glanced at Kylock with less reverence. His sneer faltered, his confidence visibly shaken. It wasn't much, but for Alex, it felt like a monumental win. Sliding the cards back into his pocket, Alex straightened and met Kylock's gaze, daring him to make the next move. The silence in the room was palpable, every student watching to see what would happen next. Kylock's smirk had vanished, replaced by a cold glare that hinted at something darker. The tension broke as the students began to disperse, murmuring among themselves. But Alex noticed Kylock retreating to a corner of the hall with Zith, Crown, and Renly. Their faces were drawn, their postures rigid, and the glint in Kylock's red eyes sent a chill through Alex's chest. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of unease. Alex moved through the academy like a shadow, keeping his head down and avoiding the places where Kylock and his crew were likely to be. But no matter how hard he tried, their presence was inescapable. Leaning against walls, lingering in hallways, their predatory eyes tracked his every move. They didn't hurl insults anymore. They didn't need to. Their silence, heavy with menace, was far worse. One evening, as the artificial lights dimmed to mimic ZL9's dusky atmosphere, Alex found himself walking down a deserted corridor. The faint hum of energy shields reverberated in the stillness, amplifying his growing sense of dread. He rounded a corner and froze. Blocking his path stood Kylock, his iridescent scales glinting faintly in the low light. Behind him, Zith, Crown, and Renly lingered like shadows, their expressions unreadable but charged with intent. Kylock stepped forward, his voice quiet yet cutting like shards of broken glass. "You've been avoiding us, Earthling," he said, his tone dripping with mockery. "That wasn't very smart." Zith, Crown, and Renly hovered behind Kylock, their expressions alive with anticipation, their eyes glinting in the dim corridor light. Alex forced himself to meet Kylock's cold, calculating stare. "Maybe I just don't like lizards," he muttered, surprised at the steadiness in his voice. Kylock didn't laugh. He didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled, a slow, predatory grin that sent a shiver crawling down Alex's spine. "You think you're clever with your little tricks," Kylock said, his voice low and dangerous. "But we know what you are, human, and we know what you're hiding." Alex tensed. "I'm not hiding anything," he snapped, though the unease coiling in his stomach told a different story. His fingers twitched toward his pocket, where his deck of cards rested, the one thing grounding him in this alien world. Kylock's sharp grin widened. "Oh, that's not what I've heard. Your species has a fondness for secrets." He leaned in closer, his breath hot and rancid against Alex's face. "I wonder what happens when those secrets are dragged into the open." Before Alex could react, Kylock's clawed hand darted out, snatching the deck from his pocket. Panic surged through Alex as he lunged to grab them back, but a firm, clawed grip clamped down on his shoulder. Crown's cold, unyielding hand held him in place with unnerving ease. Kylock flipped through the cards, his lip curling in mockery. These are nothing," he sneered before tossing the deck into the air. The cards scattered, fluttering chaotically before landing on the floor in a disordered mess. Just toys for a pathetic ape. It wasn't just the cards themselves, it was what they represented. His only connection to home, the one tangible piece of his identity, was now reduced to scattered fragments on the cold floor. Kylock's gleaming eyes told Alex everything he needed to know. They had done it on purpose, and they enjoyed every second of it. "Leave him alone." The words cut through the tense silence like a blade. All eyes turned toward the source, where a tall, violet-skinned figure stepped out from the shadows. Her striking green eyes swept over the group, her expression unreadable save for a faint flicker of disdain aimed squarely at Kylock. "Zyra," Kylock greeted, his voice dripping with feigned politeness. "What an unexpected pleasure." Zyra didn't respond to him. Her gaze settled on Alex, calm and assessing. "You're the human, right?" she asked, her tone casual, as though they were discussing the weather. Alex swallowed hard, nodding. "Yeah," he croaked, his voice barely audible. His gaze darted toward the cards scattered across the floor, a pang of despair twisting in his chest, but he forced himself to focus on Zyra, silently hoping she'd intervene. She gave a small nod, her demeanor indifferent. "Human or not, he's still a student here," she said, her voice steady and authoritative. "And unless the rules have changed, this academy doesn't tolerate bullying." Kylock's face darkened, his forced smile barely masking the fury simmering beneath the surface. "We were just introducing him to life at the academy," he said smoothly, though the venom in his voice was unmistakable. "Right, Alex?" Alex didn't respond. His eyes remained locked on Zyra, silently begging her not to walk away. Zyra's lips curved into a faint, almost mocking smile. "Interesting," she said, her green eyes flicking back to Kylock. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks more like intimidation." The tension in the corridor was electric, every second stretching unbearably long. Finally, Kylok stepped back, his expression carefully blank. "Fine," he muttered, though his eyes lingered on Alex, smoldering with unspoken menace. "But remember this, human, we're not finished." With a flick of his tail, Kylok turned and stalked away, his entourage trailing behind him like shadows. Alex exhaled sharply, his chest tight as the tension drained from his body, leaving his knees weak. "Thanks," he managed, his voice unsteady as he looked at Zyra. She shrugged, her expression as unreadable as ever. "Don't thank me, I just don't have patience for bullies." Her gaze lingered on him, faint curiosity flickering across her violet features. "But you might be more trouble than you're worth." Alex frowned, unsure how to respond, but before he could say anything, Zyra turned and walked away, leaving him alone in the empty corridor with his cards still scattered across the floor. That night, long after the artificial lights dimmed to simulate nightfall, Alex lay in his bunk, staring at the cold, metallic ceiling above him. His cards were back in his pocket, but somehow they felt heavier, burdened with the weight of everything that had happened. The sting of Kylok's taunts, the indifference in Zyra's words, and the judging eyes of his alien classmates. For the first time since arriving at the academy, Alex felt completely, achingly alone. When he'd left Earth, he'd believed he could prove something. He thought his small acts of defiance, his tricks, his persistence, could show these alien beings that humans were more than just a primitive species. But now, the harsh reality had begun to sink in. This wasn't Earth. His skills, his bravado, none of it mattered here. Here, he was just another weak creature, barely worth anyone's attention. A surge of frustration rose in him, bitter and burning. He hated them, Kylok, Zyra, all of them. He hated the academy and its suffocating halls. But most of all, he hated himself for believing, even for a moment, that he could be something more than an object of ridicule. His hand slipped into his pocket, brushing against the worn edges of his deck. He pulled it out and traced his fingers along the card's familiar ridges. This was all he had left of home, of the life he'd once known. But now, even they felt meaningless. What was a simple deck of cards against creatures who could reshape reality with their minds? Anger flared in him again, and he almost threw the deck across the room in a fit of rage. But just as his arm tensed, a memory surfaced, vivid and unbidden. A memory of his father's voice, rough and steady, cutting through the chaos in his mind. "People will see what they want to see, Alex. The trick is making them see what you want them to see." Alex froze, the words ringing in his ears. Slowly, his grip on the deck loosened, his anger simmering into something else, something quieter but stronger. It had been one of his father's lessons, part of countless hours spent mastering the art of misdirection. His dad had taught him the fundamentals of card tricks, the subtle craft of showmanship, and how to make people believe in magic, even if only for a fleeting moment. And now it all made sense. The students at the academy looked down on him because he let them. By trying so hard to blend in and avoid attention, he'd overlooked the core of his father's lesson: control the narrative. Let them see what they expect, then shatter that expectation. Slowly, an idea began to take shape in Alex's mind. He didn't need strength or telekinetic powers to beat them. He needed to make them doubt, to question, to wonder, to believe in something they didn't understand. The anger simmering in his chest cooled, replaced by a steely determination. If they wanted a show, he would give them one on his terms. The next morning, Alex walked into the academy with his head held high. He moved through the bustling corridors with quiet confidence, ignoring the whispers, the pointed stares, and the mocking smirks. He wasn't here to simply survive anymore. He was here to prove himself. That day's exercise involved solving a series of increasingly complex puzzles. Most students relied on their advanced abilities to manipulate shapes, patterns, and energy to reach the solutions. Objects floated, light bent, and intricate forms emerged in midair as aliens worked in near-perfect harmony with their mental powers. But Alex simply sat at his station with his deck of cards, methodically arranging them in front of him. His moves were deliberate, almost ritualistic, as he shifted the cards into an intricate pattern that only he understood. Kylok noticed, of course, and his smug grin widened. To him, Alex's efforts were laughable, a human playing with toys in a universe of giants. The lizard-like alien exchanged sneering looks with his crew, clearly reveling in Alex's supposed failure. Alex paid him no mind. He worked with quiet precision, his focus unwavering. Instructors passed by, their expressions flickering between confusion and intrigue as they observed his unusual approach. They didn't understand what he was doing, and that was exactly what Alex wanted. Doubt. He was planting it like a seed, a tiny fracture in the academy Academy's certainty. Soon, that fracture would spread. After class, Kylock and his gang cornered him in the corridor, their faces twisted with mockery. "Still playing your silly Earth games, human?" Kylock sneered, his voice thick with derision. "I thought we made it clear that your tricks don't belong here." Alex looked up, meeting Kylock's gaze with a slow, confident smile. "Maybe they don't," he replied, his tone light, almost playful. "Or maybe you're just afraid of what I'm capable of." Kylock's eyes narrowed, his claws flexing as his tail lashed behind him. "Is that supposed to be a challenge?" Alex shrugged, radiating a casual indifference that belied the tension in the air. "Call it whatever you want. But if you're so sure I'm worthless, why not put it to the test?" A predatory grin spread across Kylock's face, his sharp teeth glinting in the corridor light. "Fine," he hissed, his voice dripping with venom. "Tomorrow, training hall. Let's see if your little tricks can save you." As Kylock and his crew stalked away, Alex felt a quiet satisfaction settle over him. He'd planted the seed, and now he just had to let it grow. By tomorrow, the Academy wouldn't see him as weak or insignificant. The cards in his pocket felt lighter, as if they shared his anticipation for what was to come. The stage was set, the pieces perfectly arranged. Now all that remained was for Alex to play his hand. With the promise of a showdown hanging in the air, he felt a renewed sense of purpose coursing through him. The training hall was still as Alex stepped inside, his expression calm and focused. The massive dome chamber was a spectacle in itself, filled with floating platforms and pulsing energy orbs in a kaleidoscope of hues. The space was alive with anticipation, every eye locked on him. This wasn't just about his face-off with Kylock anymore, it was about the mystery he had become. The weak human they dismissed had managed to unsettle their certainty, and now they were here to see what he would do next. At the far end of the hall, Kylock stood waiting, his arms crossed and his entourage flanking him. His scaled face twisted into a smirk, radiating confidence as if the outcome was already decided. Behind him, a growing crowd of spectators gathered, students and instructors alike, drawn by the charged tension between the two rivals. Even Zyra lingered at the back, her typically aloof expression softened by a faint flicker of curiosity. "Here we are, Earthling," Kylock sneered, his voice slicing through the silence. "Ready to show everyone just how pathetic you really are?" Alex didn't bite. He tilted his head slightly, his face unreadable. "Let's just say I'm here to show you a little of Earth's best entertainment." Kylock's laugh was sharp and derisive, echoing across the room. "You think your little tricks will make a difference? You're completely out of your depth, human." The rules were straightforward. Each contender would face a series of skill-based challenges, chosen at random by the instructors. It was a test of intelligence, reflexes, and endurance. But for Alex, this was more than just a competition. It was his opportunity to shatter their expectations, to rewrite the narrative the Academy had created about him. The first challenge was a gravity-shifting obstacle course. The platforms moved unpredictably, the gravitational pull changing direction without warning. Kylock attacked it with effortless grace, using his telekinesis to glide and leap through the distorted fields as if they posed no challenge at all. He moved with the fluidity of a predator, every motion confident and precise. Alex followed, his approach entirely different. He couldn't manipulate gravity, but he could see its patterns, feel its rhythm. He studied the way the fields shifted, waiting for the exact moment to move. Each step he took was deliberate, every action timed perfectly to avoid disaster. When he finally reached the finish, just a heartbeat behind Kylock, the hall fell into a stunned silence. Whispers rippled through the crowd. The human who wasn't supposed to stand a chance had nearly matched the Academy's star contender. Kylock's smirk faltered, his tail flicking with irritation. The second challenge was a complex puzzle requiring advanced knowledge of interstellar geometry. Kylock approached the puzzle with the assured confidence of someone who had spent his entire life immersed in galactic science. Every movement was swift and precise, his mind calculating with the ease of a seasoned expert. Alex, however, took a different path. He stood back, studying the puzzle not as a series of equations or abstract shapes, but as a pattern, something familiar, reminiscent of the card tricks he knew so well. In his mind, the solution unfolded like the shuffling of a deck, the pieces falling into place one by one until the entire picture was clear. With steady hands, Alex completed the puzzle, finishing just a moment behind Kylock. The lizard-like alien shot him a sharp glance, equal parts annoyance and disbelief. Around them, the murmurs powers in the hall shifted. Where there had been derision and dismissal, something new was taking root: respect. For the first time, the spectators saw a human who defied their assumptions. Not with brute force, but with intellect and strategy, something far more difficult to dismiss. The final challenge was the most daunting: a combat simulation. The goal: disarm your opponent in an energy-based duel, requiring precision, speed, and tactical thinking. Kylok stood at one end of the hall, his body tense and ready, his eyes locked on Alex with a predatory intensity. Alex, in contrast, remained calm, his hands loose at his sides, his expression unreadable. "Let's finish this," Kylok snarled, his voice thick with frustration, the confidence of an easy victory eroding with every challenge. Alex gave a small nod. By all means, the duel began. Kylok moved first, unleashing beams of crackling energy that shot toward Alex with unerring accuracy. But Alex was ready. He sidestepped, his movements fluid and precise, dodging each strike with calculated ease. He wasn't just evading. He was watching, studying Kylok's movements, searching for the inevitable flaw. Every attack had a rhythm, a pattern, and Kylok's was no different. And then Alex saw it, a fleeting moment when Kylok's stance shifted slightly between volleys, leaving him vulnerable. Alex acted. With a single smooth motion, he drew a card from his deck and flung it. The card sliced through the air, shimmering with a faint electric charge, and struck Kylok's weapon. Sparks flared as the energy flow faltered, leaving Kylok momentarily stunned. The hall fell silent, the tension palpable. What did you just do?" Kylok hissed, his voice tinged with disbelief as he stared at the card lodged against his weapon. Alex's voice was calm, almost casual. "Just a little trick I picked up." Before Kylok could recover, Alex sent another card flying. This one struck Kylok's wrist, disarming him completely. Gasps rippled through the crowd as they watched, mesmerized. A human, using something as mundane as playing cards, had disarmed one of the Academy's most formidable students. Kylok's face twisted in rage. "No!" he roared, lunging at Alex with claws bared. But Alex didn't flinch. He flicked another card, this one crackling with an intense surge of energy. It struck Kylok square in the chest, sending him sprawling backward onto the floor. The hall went still. Alex approached slowly, standing over Kylok as the lizard-like alien struggled to catch his breath. There was no gloating in Alex's expression, no trace of triumph, only a quiet, unshakable resolve. "You think I'm weak because I don't have your powers," Alex said, his voice steady and quiet, but it carried through the hall. "But strength isn't about what you're born with. It's about what you do with what you have." Kylok glared up at him, his expression a twisted mix of anger and something else, something almost like respect. He opened his mouth as if to retort, but no words came. The truth was undeniable. He'd been beaten by a human. Without another word, Alex turned and walked away, leaving Kylok on the ground. The silence in the training hall was deafening, the crowd's eyes fixed on him. He could feel their stares as he left, but for the first time, they weren't filled with disdain or mockery. They carried something else entirely: respect. Stepping outside, Alex felt the weight of his victory settle on his shoulders. His father's lessons on misdirection echoed in his mind, but now they carried a sharper, more ominous edge. All this time, he had believed the Academy's contempt for humans was born out of simple prejudice, a belief in human inferiority. But now he understood. They didn't fear human weakness. They feared human potential. The Academy wasn't just a place of learning. It was a mechanism of control, a system designed to enforce a rigid hierarchy, keeping certain species in their place by limiting access to knowledge and skills while reinforcing ideas of superiority. Humans, with their adaptability and ingenuity, threatened to disrupt that carefully maintained order. Alex felt a chill run through him as the realization crystallized. His victory wasn't just a personal accomplishment. It was a crack in the foundation of their system, and the Academy wouldn't take that lightly. They would do whatever it took to maintain their control and prevent any further disruption. But as Alex glanced at the crowd one last time, he saw something else. Students of all shapes, sizes, and species stared at him, their expressions thoughtful. It wasn't just humans who were constrained by the Academy's hierarchy. There were others, two students who didn't fit into the Academy's narrow definition of worthy. Alex's defiance hadn't just exposed their fear of humans. It had exposed the entire system. A small, grim smile tugged at his lips. For so long, he had been focused on survival, trying to fit into their world, follow their rules. Now, he realized he didn't need to play by their rules anymore. He could make his own. The following day, Alex found himself summoned before the Academy's council, a group of imposing beings who wielded absolute authority within its walls. The chamber was vast and cold, their voices echoing like distant thunder as they questioned him. "Why did you disrupt the challenge?" one of the council members demanded, their tone sharp and icy. Alex stood tall, meeting their gaze with unwavering resolve. He wasn't here to apologize, and he had no intention of justifying himself on their terms. Because your challenges are designed to keep certain species in their place, Alex said, his voice unwavering. You claim this is a place for learning, but it's about control. And I refuse to be controlled. A ripple of shock passed through the council. Their stoic expressions faltered for a fleeting moment. They had expected defiance, but not this kind of bold, unflinching clarity. You think you can challenge us? Another council member sneered, their tone dripping with disdain. A human? Alex's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. Maybe I'm not the only one, he replied, casting a glance around the chamber. All eyes turned to the gathered students who had come to witness the confrontation. Faces of every species, from every corner of the galaxy, now bore expressions of realization and understanding. In that moment, the council recognized the truth. They hadn't just lost control over one rebellious human. They had lost the trust, the belief, and the loyalty of their students. The hierarchy they had so carefully built, the rigid structure that served their interests, was crumbling before their eyes, and they could do nothing to stop it. As Alex left the chamber, he felt a quiet sense of finality settle over him. He knew he would never return to Earth the same person who had left it. He had come to the academy searching for acceptance, for validation, for a way to prove himself. Instead, he had discovered something infinitely more valuable: freedom, not just for himself, but for every student trapped by the academy's oppressive system. The lie had been shattered, the illusion broken, and in doing so, Alex had opened a door that could never be closed. Outside, a diverse crowd of students waited for him. They stood together, united not by species or abilities, but by a shared understanding. They had all been more than what the academy had allowed them to believe. Alex felt a deep calm settle over him, a certainty that his journey here was complete. He didn't need the council's approval, nor the respect they had withheld. He had found his own path, and in doing so, had shown others the way forward. Without a word, he stepped past the crowd, leaving the academy behind, not as a defeated human, but as someone who had transcended its walls, its boundaries, and its limitations. The academy would continue, reshaping itself under a new guise, but it would never again be what it once was. Its students, now awakened, would question, resist, and eventually transform it. Alex knew his role in their story was over. He had sparked the change they needed, and that was enough. For the first time, he felt truly free. And so, the story ended, not just Alex's journey, but the academy as it had been. Forever altered by one human's refusal to conform, it became a symbol of rebellion and renewal. The galaxy would remember him, not as a hero or legend, but as a spark that ignited a revolution. A reminder that even the smallest voice, the smallest act, can reshape the stars.